A young teenage boy can see more naked women in a day than the richest kings in ancient history could ever see in a lifetime. If you think there's no consequences to that, you're greatly mistaken. Welcome to the Sageverse. Please just observe the birth of this creative surge for the purpose to leave hatred purged and replaced with words that will make you learn to take your place on earth. And once you've taken your place and found your greatest of traits, cultivated the day, this will be making you say, this is the sage's way.
Welcome to the Sageverse, where we explore the pressing questions of our age. My name's Jason, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine and fellow founder of the channel, Hermes. How are we doing today, man?
Very well, thank you, Jason. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for asking. So, it's the next episode of our 7 Deadly Sins series. What are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, I think it's the third, right? And the next on the list is lust. So we are going to decode lust, talk about the different aspects, the deadly sin, the heavenly virtue, see if we can figure it out a bit. Is there anything that immediately comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I suppose, obviously, lust is an interesting one, and it has some connection with the biblical sin, of course. You know, that's where the 7 deadly sins stem from, but or the cardinal sins. Yeah, I suppose it springs to mind this quote I came across in the Bible. It was, he who looks at another woman has already committed adultery in his heart, or something like this. So the ideas of lusting over a woman and viewing the physical body, or viewing the flesh and having a sexual arousal from that, is the process of committing adultery with one's heart. Not necessarily committing adultery in the terms of, you know,
Physically cheating.
Cheating on your partner, but more so cheating on yourself, or cheating on your virtuous
Well, I have
side.
something interesting I can go into. It's a perfect setup for
Okay.
something. So it's something I had written about the movie The Matrix, the scene where there's the woman in the red dress. And yeah, Neo famously turns his head as he felt infatuated by her. So he committed what you just said. But yeah, I wrote a little piece on that, which will paint a good picture of us, stepping into discussing lust. So I'll get straight into it. One of the most famous scenes in The Matrix is the moment where Neo is distracted by the woman in the red dress. Morpheus, named after the Greek god who conveyed messages through the portals of sleep and dreams, is explaining the truth of reality and the Matrix to Neo. Neo, who was recently unplugged from the Matrix, became distracted during this conversation by the brightly decorated, beautiful woman in the red dress. Morpheus then famously said, "Were you listening to me, Neo, or were you looking at the woman in the red dress?" Neo then turned around to find an agent holding a gun to his face. Although this was all a simulation to test Neo, which he failed. To me, the woman in the red dress is a symbol of illusion, in this case perhaps the illusion of lust. The illusion of lust has been used to control the minds of humanity for many millennia and is still going on to this day, perhaps more potently than ever before. How has the woman in the red dress appeared before you? Was it in the form of television, YouTube, Instagram, pornography, or another form of shallow escapism created to simply stimulate your animalistic desires while stopping you from experiencing truth? The next time this illusion is placed before you, will you remain at the mercy of the agents, or will you actively avert your gaze and choose truth? The choice is yours.
Interesting. Just to make a comment there, I like the addition you had for, you know, television, Instagram, you know, things that perhaps are not necessarily of a sexual nature, also share a relationship to the idea of lust. It's almost like a distraction from what you could possibly be striving for. So it's not necessarily associated with sexual desire, although that is an animalistic tendency, but it kind of combats temperance, right? Because temperance, I don't know if temperance is the heavenly virtue for lust.
The heavenly virtue, that temperance is for gluttony. I think it's chastity.
Chastity.
for
Okay.
chastity, which is obviously a period of kind of celibacy. So that
Yeah.
would make sense where that there would be a balance between those two things.
But obviously, yeah, obviously all the sins and virtues are interconnected in some sense. They overlap. So
Mm-hmm.
lust being that which separates you from, as you say, truth or what you could possibly strive for, or it's a distraction
Mm-hmm.
from reality. It's a distraction from what you should be doing, what is pursuing in
Absolutely.
terms of what is righteous. So in that sense,
I mean,
it's interesting, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's probably one of the biggest control mechanisms on planet Earth today, is because it's just such a potent desire that exists. I guess in humanity, you see it every day in
Mm.
advertisements. Like people use sex to sell. It's a famous word, sex sells. It's yeah, it's a very primal force, and it's definitely used to kind of
It's
control people.
it's
It's
embedded in our nature at the end of the day,
mhm.
right? We can't deny that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Jordan Peterson was speaking. He said literally a young teenage boy can see more naked women in a day than the richest kings in ancient history could ever see in a lifetime. If you think there's no consequences to that, you're greatly mistaken. Like, and it's so true. Like the porn industry now, it's just you can search your wildest fantasies, no matter how perverse, no matter which
It
direction you want
finances
to
off
go
that.
in. You can just simulate whatever you want now, and it's yeah, it's so true. If you think that's having no real effect on you, I mean, you are greatly mistaken. Like it is feeding that desire, that lustful desire, and it people think they're scratching an itch or fulfilling a desire when they're watching something like porn, or but it's not. It's
That's
creating new needs. It's creating new desires. It's
100%. Scratching an
you're
itch is just the surface. If anything,
mm-hmm.
it's not even the surface. It's just you're undermining the consequence that could come from it.
Mm-hmm. And that's not to say like all sex is lust or is
Of
sin.
course.
Like I disagree with that completely, and a lot of people misconstrue that because almost every religion in some way they paint like sex before marriage. I mean, sex after marriage. Like taking periods of celibacy. You'll find that in most kind of philosophical teachings, religions, Buddhism, Taoism, and I think there's a reason for that, and it is because like this is one of the most potent illusions on planet Earth that can stray you, can take you off path, and but again, it's not to say that all sex is bad. Like a sex is ultimately about love and connection, and
Exactly.
obviously procreation. Like it can be a beautiful thing that fulfills
You
the
have
soul, but lust is like the dirty kind of shadow cousin of that, which takes more from you than it gives.
well, this is an interesting thing, right? Because you have two arguably very powerful forces. One being arguably the most powerful, which is love, which
Mm-hmm.
resembles true love. Love in its um, in its pure form is
Mm-hmm.
an truth at the end of the day. It's also, a pure thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's good at the end of the day, especially unconditional love. So it
Yeah.
resembles that purity, that selflessness, that sense of
Mm.
sacrifice. It resembles virtue, whereas lust is almost like it's shadow. It's almost like
Mm.
the negative, the illusion, the fantasy. It's almost the
Yeah,
opposite
it
of
is the
truth,
fantasy.
right? It's the
And if
opposite
you
of
if you're
truth.
gonna if you're gonna
You're right.
compare those two
Yeah, sorry,
things,
go
like
on.
someone seeing you in a loving way, they're not just seeing, they're not objectifying you. They're not just seeing the physical. They're seeing,
Of course,
your
yeah.
soul. They're seeing who you truly are. They're really accepting and, connecting with you as a human being of all aspects of yourself. Lust is usually just an objectifying kind of notion where someone doesn't care who you are. They want no real connection with you. It's just they care how you look. They care
It's
about your
fantasy.
body. Yeah, they want to fulfill fantasy. It's almost like mutual masturbation.
Yeah, you're in love with an
Lustful
idea
sex.
of that person rather than that person in their true being, right? So yeah, it's a poison in that sense because it can become very self-destructive because like you say, it's all about the self. It's all about fulfilling this need and this desire,
Mm.
and lust, there are many consequences that it can manifest in. Obviously, the most destructive arguably being, ruling over a woman that doesn't consent to that sort of thing could be
Mm-hmm.
a consequence of lust. because that is the potency of lust. It can result in that kind of thing. I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. There's a quote, as you mentioned, destructive. It's by an ancient Indian polymath. It's a really good quote. It's his name was Chanakya. It's
Okay.
there is no disease as destructive as lust, and I wholeheartedly believe that. I think it literally is a bottomless pit that you're going to continually be trying to fill. And I think it arises through the absence of love. I think when you don't feel fulfilled in love, you're trying to fill this void you feel within you, which is the void of love, but you're trying to fill it with lust. It's like you're seeking real nourishment, real food that's going to fulfill you, and you're just eating, Twinkies or something that's never going to truly fulfill you. It's way more like sugary. It gets your blood sugar high. You feel like energy, but it's short-lived, and you kind of have a death of energy straight after. I don't know if you've experienced that before, but I surely have.
Lust is a tricky one, because it almost represents that artificial form of love, because
Exactly.
it disguises itself as love, because when you're lustful, unless you're aware of the fact that you are sexually aroused by the physical flesh or the body of another person, you may convince yourself otherwise, that you're actually in love, which is, a lie. And that's where I think there is a connection between, that deception or that lying with lust, whereas love is pure, arguably, true, and doesn't lead to the consequences that lust does. Love does not cause someone to hurt another person, whereas I think lust could. Obviously, love, when it is betrayed or when it's unrequited and all these different things, arguably would not be love if that turned into something that was, poisonous, such as revenge or whatever, if there was a consequence of betrayal or whatnot. And I think that then that would say that wasn't true love, because arguably true love is sacrifice and protection and, not those negative things I mentioned. So,
I mean, it's
that's
tricky
where,
because it's just so potent, and love isn't. In that aspect, I think Kanye said it like, "Why does
love is
everything
peaceful.
that's so bad make me feel so good?" Like love, you can almost compare to water. It's purely fulfilling. It's what the body needs. It's air as
It's
well. Air and
nourishing.
water have no taste, though. It's almost. But when it comes to lust, it almost clings onto you. It like enhances your desires. You want to go back. It does something to you. It's almost
It's an
like drinking
addiction.
Coca-Cola in comparison to water. Like you kind of it creates an addiction. You're right. Or smoking instead of air. But that's why I think the heavenly virtue is necessary. If you have had a moment of lust or a few years of lust, I think the practice of the heavenly virtue, chastity, which I don't think is possible for like a lifetime. I think it's an extreme, just as lust is an extreme. But in order to find balance, sometimes you need to experience both sides of the extreme. And I think personally for myself, like when I was young, I was very much like following that young man's, just kind of because when
I
young
mean,
boys are,
yeah,
you
every
have
young
those
boy
male,
goes through this
yeah,
phase.
you have those male role models and stuff that like the more women you sleep with, that's how men are kind of rated and things like that. So I had a period of that kind of before going to China. And when we did go to China, we were, like you said, we're in a complete desolate part of the world where there's not a lot of people around. It was the perfect opportunity for me to have that period of chastity. And yeah, like literally like being away, and I really experienced the benefits of chastity. It's almost like a reset in my body. There was no, like I said, when you have a high influx of sugar, you have a
Yeah.
sugar rush and then a crash, and that lasts for a few days. It's the same with lust, but I mean, it could last for months with lust. And I felt like my body found peace again, like having a bit of chastity. And there's the quote, I'm just going to finish with that, with the heavenly virtue of chastity. It's by Solon.
Yeah.
Pure chastity is beauty to our souls, grace to our bodies, and peace to our desires.
Do you say Solon?
Mm-hmm.
The
Solon.
The Athenian statesman. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Interesting.
right.
That's the
Hmm.
thing about these transhistorical truths. Obviously, Solong is not the only person that's probably said that. There are,
Hmm.
many different philosophers and
Like I said,
important
first time
exposed
I had an
people.
ancient Indian philosopher, then
Yeah.
you have a Greek statesman. Like, this is before the internet and all this communication between countries and states. Like, so these truths were being found just in different ways and different words in different places. So you're right, it's transhistorical truths, and that's when you know that something's true, when you can find it in multiple different places on Earth,
Yeah.
the East, the West, and they're saying the same thing.
Yeah, or at least, it's strong evidence for its case, for at least its
Hmm.
potency or its relevancy to our human condition. It's
Hmm.
insight into the human experience at the end of the day. And wisdom
Hmm.
is just human experience that has gone through the labors and trials of life so that, you can make better decisions in the future. But arguably, we learn virtue through vice, I think. When you're a young boy, you have to go through a certain degree of emotional spectrum, right? You have to go through that spectrum of emotions in
Yeah.
order to learn what is right from wrong or what is wrong from right. So it's difficult to say because going down the road of pure abstinence is almost like not enjoying the process of life because
Mm.
because life and our natural instinct or our how we live is lust is a form of living, or all these different emotions, they are a part of
Hmm.
human nature, and therefore they will come about in every human being. As Jesus said, though he who is without sin cast the first stone. everyone
Mm.
everyone experiences some form of sin or some form of vice, just as
Yeah.
everyone might experience some kind of virtue. But
Yeah.
the idea is to cultivate virtue, but to be self-aware and accepting of the fact that perhaps there will be slip-ups and things like this along the way. And I don't
Mm.
think it's realistic to live an
No, it's not
abstinent life,
realistic.
or because
I mean, as you
that's a
say
part
many
of nature that you're
times,
removing yourself from, and that's not real,
absolutely,
is
it
it?
is a natural animalistic, nature that exists within us. Just it is to breathe, just it is to eat, and it's like as though, as you say many times, any virtue that takes itself too far compromises itself.
Yeah.
So because it is an unbalance at the end of the day, it's the other side of the extreme, and we've seen how that compromise can happen. There's many cultures, Catholicism, for example, where priests practice complete abstinence. Same with certain Buddhist monks, and it can be found in different cultures as well. And there's also, I've had cases when I was living in Thailand in regards to some monks and also Catholic priests. We know the kind of rumor that comes along with that, in which they were, there's certain pedophiles that I think that's what happens when you completely cut off your animalistic, desire. It's gonna still find its way out, just in kind of unnatural, strange ways. That's like saying you're trying to quit unhealthy food, so you stop eating completely. Eventually, you're gonna be starved, and you're gonna go at someone's throat for some food,
Yeah,
or
it's
or
a good
you
analogy.
stop breathing because you want to quit smoking. It doesn't make sense. It could be a period of like fasting. That's how I see it, but it's not a lifetime kind of practice. I don't think it's normal. I don't think it's natural for it to be a lifetime practice.
That's why when it comes to creating the ideal way to live, if we're going to go down that path and say how do we manage and organize these emotions and these tendencies that we have. And I think that cultivating virtue, especially self-control, temperance, they are tools in which allow us to exercise our mental faculties in order to pursue the emotion or the feeling without any kind of necessary consequence to it. It's fine every now and then to perhaps dance with the devil, as we speak,
Mm.
because it's very difficult to live a perfect life because no one is perfect.
Yeah, that's unrealistic.
It's completely unrealistic, but one shouldn't lose sight of trying to make progress. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
progress, no matter how slippy that progress might be, is still it's still progress at the end of the day. So striving
No, for sure.
towards And that's why, when you get older, you mature, right? And maturity is a sign of experience and learning, how to live, essentially. That's kind of what maturity is. You've grown up and you've gone through certain parts of life, and you've realized what you should do, what you should say, how you should behave, how you should not behave. And that's experience that serves us, and we wouldn't get that if we did not go through trials and errors. And just to avoid, that, we'll always keep that curiosity there, and God knows what that curiosity might manifest in. So it's
100% agreed. I'd say in the modern day, like, where I think it's most prevalent, I think it's pornography addiction. I think that's something very prevalent in the modern day. It's like I've heard and spoken to a lot of young men that are suffering. It's just they can't stop watching it. It's just something is so enticing. It's really tapping into that desire. Like I said, it's a completely new thing. No other generations didn't really have to deal with it to this level. Maybe they had like carvings on the wall, like naked women or magazines, but I mean,
or maybe they were more sexually active in a physical sense.
100%, I think
I
so.
believe, because
if anyone is struggling that is watching this, I did release a video, 5 rules to stop watching porn. It's on the Sageverse. If you want to go check that out, it might be helpful. And I'd also recommend this song. It's called "The Bitten Apple." So like, to symbolize original sin. It's by Brother Ali. It's a really good song. I've got some lyrics here from it just to kind of present it. So it's a really, really good song. It really paints that picture perfectly. So in this lyric, he said, "Self-hate, feasting on your deepest, darkest secrets, warning signs, reading, help needed, too ashamed to seek it, seems so easily deleted when you're browsing, but can't erase the history of what your eyes allowed in, the intimately profound ecstasy that gives life, stripped of all its meaning till it eats you from the inside."
Yeah, I mean, that hits it on the head.
Speaks for itself, yeah. I mean, the deleting of the history, I love that. You can't delete it from your mind. Like, everyone has had that experience, like, delete the history. I don't want my parents to see what I've been watching, or my
Well, the
whoever.
fact that you have to delete history speaks for itself, does it not?
I mean, yeah, why are you trying to hide it if it's something that you are proud of that you're doing,
Is
or
society
you're
trying
content
to
with that you're doing?
Is society trying to bring acceptance towards these subjects? Or is it something that we just define as adult entertainment, right?
I mean, I think they're trying to normalize it. Like, I think it's just such a prevalent addiction that everyone is just normal with it now. They're pretending there's nothing wrong with the fact that people are spending, multiple hours a week just searching for other people, sleeping with each other, people that they don't know, people they have no connection with, in all sorts of different categories, all sorts of different ways. And I don't think that's normal at all. I don't think it's a part of the human experience. It shouldn't be a part of the human experience. I think sex is a part of the human experience, absolutely. But like, pornography is almost like you're putting yourself in some weird matrix, some weird illusion, and it's doing something to your brain. And again, if you want to watch my video, I go more into it. 5 ways to stop watching porn. Like, go check it out. I think it is destructive, and yeah, it needs to be stopped.
Yeah, that's the poison right there, because as it becomes generally more accepted and normalized, what is the path therefore after that? What is the path? Yeah. Because how do we educate our children? If it's something that's become so accepted, are we then going to be exposing young people to this kind of filth?
I mean, they are being exposed. They are being exposed.
That's the problem.
More and more young people have smartphones, and it's very hard. Like, if you give your child a smartphone without any kind of block on it, you're setting them up for like failure, basically, I think. And like, kids are showing each other all sorts of nonsense like that they shouldn't be showing each other. And there's this clip in this series called Euphoria, where like this couple, they really like each other, they have really good connection, and then they're about to have sex for the first time, and then he just gets super aggressive and like, almost like rapey, and then she's like, stop. And then he wasn't seriously raping her, but he was like, that's what he's seen in porn, that was his education of how you have sex. And she was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, and it's true, that's not what true making love is. What porn depicts is fantasy, it is entertainment, it's not true sex. That's where I think a lot of young people are getting educated on, like, because there's almost a taboo that's painted with sex. Maybe that's because of religion, I don't know, but it almost became an uncomfortable thing to talk about in the home. But if you're not talking about it with your children, then they're going to learn from elsewhere, and it's not going to be the correct path. So I think it needs to be more normalized in the aspect we talk about true sex, like loving sex, connection. You should do it for connection and love, because that's what it's truly about at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's many other people that are going to teach them in the wrong way if you don't intervene first.
I suppose, it's almost like the question of whether or not an education is needed is not actually the question anymore, because that question has already been answered because of the very fact that there is something already out there that can't be stopped. Therefore, an alternative education, arguably from the parents, needs to be there, right? Otherwise, your kids get, like you say, your kids getting educated elsewhere, and perhaps back in the day there was a lack of education, but at least in those times you had to discover it yourself. You weren't learning from these fantasies that we see on the internet and everywhere we go. It was something that was discovered between two people, and sure, consequences come from that. If people aren't educated on how to make a baby and things like this, then obviously it doesn't take a genius to figure out that sooner or later someone will get pregnant and whatnot. But back in the day, obviously sex was a very taboo subject. And I suppose people figured out things themselves, but they didn't have these distractions. So almost we have to educate the children in the right way. Otherwise, they'll be educated from these sites, and that's just poison for the mind. It's fantasy, and it's not a true reflection, as you say, of what love is. So
no, for sure, man. And yeah, going back to that song I mentioned, it finishes with a quote. I'm not sure if it's by the artist, but it's I really liked it. Kind of discussing what you said there about the difference with kind of love and lust. So it says, "Now that I have died, I have no taste for life or the affairs of the living, only for love and the affairs of the lovers. The affairs of the living are many and assorted. The affairs of the lovers are singular and complete. Do not mourn this walking carcass. Some are dead because they are without life. Others are dead because they are beyond life. Yet others have forgotten the affair of life and death altogether."
interesting, very poetic.
Just that idea of lust is many and assorted. You're never going to truly be fulfilled by it. You're going to be constantly searching different categories, 30 pages deep into Pornhub, and you're just still searching for something that is never going to fulfill you. But love is singular, it is complete, and it is what you're truly searching for. That is the nourishment that your body is searching for when you're on those expeditions that need to be stopped.
Yeah. It's interesting because, applying just to shiny objects, I'm someone that enjoys new experiences or novelty and is attracted to new things. And that can stem from technology to cities to live in. I don't know. I'm attracted to ideas at the end of the day. So in some sense, I'm an idea junkie. So it's interesting to see what the place of lust is in that. Because arguably, when I want something, I have to, first of all, see whether it addresses a purpose or anything like that. Because otherwise, my mind's going crazy and could want anything. But it has to be, there has to be a purpose behind what it's going to be performing. And then it's the process of me narrowing down what I want. So, and then I'm very firm on that decision. So it's not the case that, I let my mind as free and as gravitating it is towards new experiences and new things, shiny objects even, anything that interests me, I still try and bring back the reins on asking myself, does this fulfill a purpose? Do I need this? And how will this benefit my life? And then that allows me to draw the best out of what I get, and doesn't allow me to, go down this bottomless pit, as you say. And that, I suppose that is lust. That can be a form of lust, when it's unrestrained.
Man. I mean, in this life, we're here to have a physical experience. You are, at some point, as you said, going to dance with the devil. It's just you need to just try to avoid falling into that addiction cycle and getting stuck there, because it will take everything from you. And yeah, I think some men that settle down too young and never had any kind of fun or experience, sometimes they live forever curious, and they try to fulfill their needs through these other portals. I've read a study where the most religious states in America are the ones with the highest porn subscriptions.
Yeah,
So I mean that's also
goes to
telling, as we said, with the balance between chastity and lust. You know, I do think life experience is important, but I think do it in a way where it's, you know, connection with people and not
progress.
You know, just objectifying, not, you know, just treating people how they shouldn't be treated, things like that. And like I said, if you don't ever experience dancing with the devil, sometimes you'll live your life forever curious. And I think more likely that both sides of the extreme, if you didn't have any kind of experience, you're going to live your life forever curious, and I think you're more likely to cheat in that aspect. If you overindulge, then you put yourself in an addiction cycle in which you can't break, even if you want to break it. And again, if you do find someone that you fall in love with, you're going to cheat as well. So I think both sides, it's about finding balance. Like, life is all about balance. Have your experience, but ultimately the end goal, I think, for most people, they are seeking, you know, true love, to truly be seen, to truly be accepted by another human being.
Yeah, well said. Just to finish up though, I want to ask you one more question and then we can wrap up.
Go for it.
Because it's interesting when we look in the past. Obviously, statistics today show that young people are actually having less sex, and I think that sex is now online, right? With all these internet sites basically selling sex. So the question for you is then, back in the day, do you think that there was generally more sex in terms of, you know, people were physically having sex and more sexually active? And if so, was that more consequential than what we have today?
I don't think it's more consequential. I think putting ourselves in this pornographic simulation, which is kind of never ending. I think there's things that can be put in place for promiscuous young people, which were from parents, from the schools, things like that, which obviously sometimes are going to get over, which I don't think is almost always the worst thing either, having these experiences and things like that. It's a real experience at the end of the day.
That's my point.
Porn isn't a real experience, and I think it's truly a lot more detrimental. And of course they're having sex less because, you know, think about when you watch porn, there's always a release. There's an orgasm for men and for women, which floods the brain of dopamine. You just feel like completely and men as well. You lose your seed, you lose testosterone, and you feel almost like uninterested in sex. I know most men I've spoken to, as soon as you finish watching a video, you feel completely like sex is the last thing on your mind after that, after you've had that release. And if you're constantly
100%.
doing that, you're not going to go out seeking it. You're not going to have this libido, this drive in you that's going to usually leads you naturally towards wanting to have sex. You're just wasting your sexual energy on a screen. And also when you do orgasm, you actually a bonding chemical is released in the brain, so you know you bond with a person.
You're bonding with your bloody HP laptop.
Exactly, you're bonding with your laptop, bonding with your phone. Maybe that's why there's this technological addiction in the modern day as well. It's weird and it's not natural. I'm sorry, the other way is a lot better.
Yeah, that's my point. So back in the day, at least, you know, there was a natural connection there, and at the end of the day, if it results in a child, people were reproducing, and you know, back then it was a very different story because, you know, life just went on. I think. But anyway,
yeah, agreed.
I think we can leave that for another day.
I think we uncovered a lot.
Yeah, it was good speaking with you.
You too. Yeah, it was a good one. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And yeah, peace out.
Peace.
Welcome to the Sageverse, with real works and true words. Patterns of recognition leave your brain converged. Time is irrelevant when the thoughts of impediment corrupt your soul with mind-numbing nemesis. The sage's way is where the truth hits the page. Turn your soul into a library in the name of knowledge and discovery. We seek out reality to be gone of human apathy.